in which staff learned to cater for the needs of white tourists.
My cousins and I went into one of these hotels in Montego Bay for service, and we got none. As if we were not there. The people who were serving, blacker than we were, simply ignored us. And my cousins and I created a very considerable scene. I recall us turning over the tables and demanding service, which tells us two things. One, about the extent of prejudice in Jamaica at the time of independence, and two, the extent to which even middle-class Jamaicans were not prepared to put up with it.
The eyes of the world were on the Honourable Norman Manley, Premier of Jamaica, as he prepared to leave his homeland for the most momentous of all conferences.
By 1962, the only option was to go it alone. The momentum for independence was now unstoppable. Manley knew that without it, the country would be forever tied to its colonial past, something a privileged few had grown comfortable with.
You had a kind of unease among people, particularly middle-class people or people who are moneyed or landed or whatever, with the idea of the mass having a universal vote which could upset a lot of things, and to lose the comfort of the British protection. And what I think happened is that gradually people began to recognize, well, wait a minute, we're people too, we're a society. Why can't we run our own affairs?
Never have Jamaicans been so gay, cleaning up, painting up for Independence Day. Ask anyone from tots to grandpops, they all say, clean up, paint up for Independence Day.
On the morning of August 3rd, at the Palisadoes International Airport, the moment approaches for the arrival of Her Royal Highness Princess Margaret.
Britain had already begun to let go of its many colonies around the world. It was time for the mother country to cut Jamaica loose. This time there was no bloody rebellion. On August the 6th, 1962, with the simple flourish of a royal signature, it was done. Jamaica was independent.
I remember being very emotional. In fact, I'm still emotional, if you forgive me. And saying, well, we are our own people. We have our own direction. Tremendous hope, our movement forward now.
From the airport, the Princess drives through the gaily decorated streets of Kingston, where thousands of spectators line the route to witness the first major event of the 8 days of celebrations.
I remember my first outfit was this black dress with green and gold piping all over it. And so I was in the Jamaican colors and feeling so great. It was a wonderful feeling.
Princess Margaret is met by the Prime Minister, Sir Alexander Bustamante, who introduces the Minister of Education, the Honourable Edwin Allen, and the Honourable Edward Seaga, Minister of Development and Welfare.
For Norman Manley, who'd been the orchestrator of independence, the moment was tinged with sadness. Only weeks before, Buster had been elected the first Prime Minister of free Jamaica.
It was a great personal sadness in the family. My grandfather had been beaten. Myself and my grandmother were just so broken up for him that we were going to see someone else lead our independence. It was so unbelievable that the sculptor who had brought the independence up out of the wood wasn't having his name on the bottom of the carving. It was heartbreaking for us.
Present!
Yellow for natural riches, black for the struggle, and green for hope. What would it be like to go it alone? To really be a big island? Vestiges of the past are everywhere here, but 1962 promised a new dawn. In those early years, it delivered both a cultural awakening and an economic boom, driven mostly by the discovery of bauxite. It was essential for the making of aluminium, and Jamaica had more of it than anyone else.
Jamaica in those days was referred to as the Jamaican miracle. You couldn't help but feel the great excitement of the period. And as I said, with an average growth rate of over 6% per annum, we were then the fastest growing country in the developing world.
Jamaica was on a roll. It was finding its place in the world. Martin Luther King came to address students at the University of the West Indies. But for all the outward confidence, there was discontent amongst the poor in downtown Kingston. They called themselves the sufferers. On the 100th anniversary of the Paul Bogle uprising, they looked to a new breed of politician for deliverance. He was Edward Seaga, a slick former music promoter and the JLP's rising star. In 1965, Edward Seaga addressed a crowd of thousands of people here in National Heroes Park, evoking the memory of the rebel Paul Bogle. As he spoke, the crowd heckled him. He responded with what sounded like a declaration of war. If they think that they are bad, I can bring the crowds of West Kingston. We can deal with them in any way, at any time. It will be fire for fire, blood for blood. Buster and Norman Manley watched in horror as the young Seaga signalled the beginning of a new and dangerous political phase. Whereas Bogle had fought on behalf of all Jamaicans, this was to set them at each other's throats.
There was an early period in my life in the mid-late 1960s in which I had a political outburst on the occasion of the unveiling of a monument to one of our national heroes, in which I did make some very intemperate remarks.
But they had the desired effect. Edward Seaga built up a strong power base in downtown Kingston. Here residents were forced to live along a political divide enforced by gangs.
Mother sent him to buy some greens, and when he went waiting for the greens, a lot of JLP supporters came upon him and chopped him up, cut him up. See there? All both away.
Tivoli Gardens became a JLP Seaga stronghold, while Trenchtown was home to PNP supporters. The battle lines were drawn, and some of the bloodiest conflicts would be fought here.
In our yard, we were known as JLP supporters. In those days, they used to fight politics with stones, bottles and stones and sticks. So you would find that at the end of a public meeting, when the People's National Party would end their public meeting and people are going home, and they would pass our place, they would throw stones. My grandmother would say to me, go under the bed, Babsy, I don't want anybody to, anything to hit you.
After 30 years, Norman Manley retired from politics. It was the late 60s. Civil rights had taken hold in the States. Young black Jamaicans were no longer grateful to the generation that had won them independence.
The fact that they singled him out to blame for a lot of the things that they felt were going wrong since independence, I think their anger at him and their dismissal of him must have been very painful, though always he would intellectually come to terms with it. Youth does this, they have to rebel against things.
First of all, you got a sense of an awakening. And that showed itself across the board. The growth of a sense of rejection and rebellion. Babylon must fall. Babylon being the society of colonialism, which continued into the late 60s and early 70s.
When you hear that Jamaica, independent Jamaica, has a black prime minister, you say, well, those people are in power. That's black power. But that's baloney. That is hogwash. That's a damn lie.
But Jamaica wasn't ready to elect a black leader. Instead, it turned again to the brown middle classes, to a trade union leader who'd been educated in London. Michael was Norman's second son, but he spoke to a whole new generation.
He was tall and handsome, and the girls at school used to whistle at him and call him sexy, and I loved that.
We didn't need another Norman who didn't have that common touch. But he proved to be something his father never was, somebody who would stir a crowd and pull them along with him by just the sheer magnetism of what he said and how he said it.
Daddy was cut out for it. He had that secret ingredient that Buster had, which I think Daddy used, I suspect, a little more honorably.
Physically very active, and of course, perhaps the most handsome man in the country.
Darling, you're so beautiful.
He was good looking and believed in keeping his body fit. I mean, I always say to people, when I fell in love with his midriff. I'd never seen a midriff so flat.
Michael Manley was born in St. Andrews, Jamaica. He met his first wife while studying at the London School of Economics. They had one daughter, Rachel. Though his first love was journalism, Michael returned home to find his political destiny already laid out for him.
I recall telling him that I didn't think the PNP was radical enough, and he got very angry. Manley was very good at getting angry and losing his temper when he said that if you want to be a Che Guevara, you can go to the hills, but I'm not into that. And I said, well, I don't want to be a Che Guevara and I don't want to go to the hills, but I just think that the People's National Party is too rooted in the middle class to make the kind of changes that I believe necessary to uplift the working class and the disadvantaged.
When Norman Manley died in 1969, Michael became leader of the People's National Party. Jamaica desperately needed new direction. There was high unemployment, poverty, and almost no social welfare. Manley believed he knew what had to be done and how to take the people with him.
There was a thing called the bandwagon, which grabbed artists, popular artists, and went around the country to different locations. There was the whole business of getting away from the ostentation, that the official dress was going to be shirt jacks.
Flamboyant, charismatic, good-looking, eloquent. Michael Manley could convince you that he's the greatest guy in the world, and you'd believe him.
I remember one night during the campaign, the people got so excited about him that they would literally pick him up when he appeared. And I don't know what went wrong this night, but as they maneuvered through the crowd with him up there, he fell, they dropped him. And he cracked a couple of ribs. We had to rush to the hospital, do all of that stuff. And you know, the next day he was out on the campaign trail again.
We've come too far, we're not turning back now. We've come too far, we're not turning back now. We have a pride now, we have a place now, we have a mission now. And I say to you, my friends, together we are going to march forward under God's heaven, building democratic socialism. Glory to socialism!
Michael Manley said, yes, people, better must come.